Anyway, I guess we'll get started. Oh yeah, you're definitely gonna look hipster with a man bun sometimes, depending on what you're wearing, I guess. But it can also look kind of cool if you're wearing like a suit too. It's a suave look, I think. Anyway, okay. So hi everyone, welcome to tonight's stream. We're talking about disordered eating and body image, and this subject is really, really close to my heart, I guess, which is why I have a lot of stories that I would be, I guess, willing to share. I don't ever really talk about this side of myself much because it's very emotional for me. But this is where we're here to talk about this stuff. So I figured if I put myself out there, it might be comforting for someone or helpful. I don't know. So I have two kind of research articles, but I didn't even write down the citation information for them because there's not much I'm going to say from them, just like a couple statistics that I thought were interesting. A lot of the scholarly peer-reviewed articles that I could find online were kind of doing their own small sample sizes to test theories about things that, like, the results aren't really that shocking or interesting, so it would kind of be a waste of your time for me to just reiterate all of those to you. But there were some points that I thought were worthy of sharing, so I just have a few of those, and then I have my own sort of notes, and a lot of that stuff comes from free websites online, so I'm going to announce the name of the website before I start talking about the information that I sourced from that website. So that is my open citation, I guess, for this. That format will follow for the whole talk. So I guess first to start off with, do you guys know what disordered eating is? When you hear that, what do you think? If anyone is comfortable replying, what do you think disordered eating is? And this is a very fitting day for me to be talking about this stuff because I really overate today and I felt extremely bad about it, and I still do in this very moment. I feel like I ate way too much. And I also didn't exercise this morning because I'm incredibly sore today. Yesterday was like my 6th day in a row exercising. And my body was just like, please stop. So I gave myself a break today. And I think that giving myself a break mixed with being anxious, I just ate more than I wanted to. Hey Sarah, how's it going? Good to see you again. Okay, so since no one wants to... Okay, well, here's one then. An unhealthy relationship with eating, fast food, not enough food, and so on. Yeah, sorry, we moved the stream forward an hour to cope with sleeping schedules better. So yeah, that's a great start. So disordered eating, good. Binge eating, eating too little, those are like the main ones that people know about, right? Is anorexia, which is not eating hardly anything, and bulimia, which is inducing vomiting and or taking laxatives to have to use the restroom in order to dispose of the food after you eat it, so nothing really stays in. And when we think about disordered eating, a lot of the times those are the main two things that people talk about or know about, is bulimia and anorexia. And a lot of the times as well, when we talk about this subject, it's focused primarily on white girls, younger females who are white. And that's kind of a shame because it creates this false perception that the only people who suffer from eating disorders are white women, and that is far from the truth. Anorexia and bulimia are the only two actual eating disorders that are, I've talked a few times in different streams about the DSM, this manual essentially that all of the psychologists and psychiatrists in the world agree, doctors agree, these are the medical conditions that exist formally. So in those medical documents, anorexia and bulimia are listed. However, some of the stuff that Vince was talking about, this whole concept of an unhealthy relationship with eating, those things don't technically count in the book. However, I think, and research shows, so it's not just my opinion, that far more people are dealing with disordered eating. So anorexia and bulimia are eating disorders, but disordered eating is essentially just having an unhealthy relationship with food. It means that you are eating or not eating in a way to maintain, reach a certain goal. It can be very obsessive, and it can cause a lot of problems in your life. And these things are not talked about enough. The focus is always on being too small, and that's not it either. There are plenty of people who are, you would think that they're average sized or that they are even overweight, and you assume they're like, oh, well, they can't have an eating disorder. And like, okay, maybe they don't have the eating disorder that you're thinking of, but they could have disordered eating. And even some larger people who don't fit the stereotypical mold, I should say, have these problems as well. It's not something that's reserved for skinny white girls. So yeah, exactly right there. Gaining weight, losing weight, these are things that we can become very, very fixated on, and they can create disordered eating. So personally, I didn't know what that was. My first actual understanding of disordered eating was only a number of months ago, even though it's something that I've clearly been doing my whole life. Now that I know what it is, I was browsing YouTube one day, probably procrastinating something I should have been doing, and I saw a video from a girl called Jordan Shrinks, I think is her YouTube name, and she had a video that was something about how I stopped eating so much or something like that. And I saw on the thumbnail, the difference between her before and her after, and I was like interested, because I'm definitely someone who is obsessed with weight and body image, and I'm enthralled by those kinds of TV shows. I used to religiously watch The Biggest Loser. I watch My 600-Pound Life or whatever, like all of those kinds of shows I would watch when they would be getting like gastric bypass surgery. There's this one that comes out of the UK. I don't remember what it's called, but this person goes and tries to help someone who has a very, very poor diet and poor habits, and they essentially do like a live autopsy on them. They do all these tests on them, and then they kind of project their own organs onto their body and show them how bad their body's doing. So all of those kinds of shows I've always been very interested in, and seeing Jordan's thumbnail intrigued me, and I was like, okay, what's this about? I want to watch this girl's weight loss journey, which, by the way, there's a lot of those on YouTube, I now know. And in this, she started talking about like compulsive eating, and this idea of eating even when you're full, or continually eating, thinking obsessively about food. And I've always kind of joked about that to myself, like, oh man, I love food. I'm so addicted to food. I think about it all the time. But that's actually true. And that's the only way that I've ever really voiced it out loud, is when like somebody else says something about food, and then I kind of like am encouraged to chime in and say like, yeah, I love food, or like, oh my God, I could really go for whatever. And I've had conversations with some of you in here who, hi Switzerland. No, it wasn't. I've had conversations with some of you in here that like, obviously I'm talking a lot about food, and I really mean those things from the bottom of my heart. Like, I love food. I think about it all the time. When I was a kid, I ate pretty much to my heart's content. But of course, when that happens, then you may have a parent who steps in and tries to get you to stop eating because they realize that you're starting to be unhealthy. I stress eat too, and I'm stressed all the time too, and it's very, very difficult to stop stress eating or comfort eating when you are in periods of intense emotions for a lot of people. Hello. So all of this gets wrapped up into your body image as soon as people start commenting on your eating habits. And that can happen really any point in time in your life, but it seems to happen most often for a lot of us when we're kind of in childhood, and then especially when we're moving into puberty. I can very, very distinctly remember when we were in elementary school, I guess, and around the 4th or 5th grade, a couple of the guys in my class who I was really good friends with started putting on a lot of weight. Of course, I didn't say anything because at the time I was already being bullied for my size, but I, of course, noticed. You don't not notice when somebody gains a lot of weight, a drastic amount. And then in middle school, you really started being able to see how that was playing out. So for the boys, most of the time, I never really saw what kind of teasing or pain they were going through, and a lot of you would probably have more insight into that than I would, because that world was kind of kept separate and private. And I don't know if there was hazing in the locker rooms at gym, or if people, I know for me, like AOL Instant Messenger was a huge way to target and hate on people and just treat them like dirt. And that happened to me a lot. So I don't know if that was also happening in the male world, but I started to notice, at least by high school, that certain guys had made it like their mission to get fit. It became all they wanted to do was to lose weight and get strong. They had this whole obsession with becoming muscular. And it was both the overweight kids and the underweight, skinny guys who were trying to bulk up with their friends as well. So it didn't just affect one or the other. It was kind of all body types were involved in this. For me, it was definitely my mom who was one of the first people who made me feel bad about food. To start off with, my family was really, really weird. Really weird. They have a lot of issues, but outside of that, they also had these strange dogmas. I guess thanks to my dad, we were not allowed to eat no chocolate, food coloring, which is in literally everything, caffeine, sodas. We could only have one on the weekends. And of course, since we weren't allowed to have caffeine, it would have to be Sprite, 7-Up. Nowadays, there's a lot more options for food that don't have food coloring in them. But when we were kids, like, there were no Welch's, fruit snacks. Everything was Gushers and fruit roll-ups. And even Kraft macaroni and cheese has dyes in it. So, like, pretty much everything that kids liked, Doritos, like, whatever, we were not allowed to have at all. So that was the first sort of weird eating thing that was in my life. And it definitely made me have a bad relationship with all of those things, because when I would get the opportunity to try, by the time I was in like the 5th grade, I knew that it wasn't going to kill me. Earlier than that, I had this whole like thing that I was going to have some terrible allergic reaction and die, which wasn't the case. But when I finally hit around the 5th grade, I started experimenting, and like, if someone was passing around candy at school, I would have a piece that I wasn't supposed to have. And then I thought, like, wow, this tastes so good, like really good. So then every time I had the opportunity to sneak something that I wasn't supposed to have, I did. So this led to hiding eating a lot as well. If I could get something from school, I would hide it in my backpack and then sneakily bring it up to my room, hide it in things. And it reminded me a lot of what was the name of that movie? Do you guys remember the movie where Ben Stiller is a fat camp counselor and the boys, Heavyweights, I think it was called? This movie was huge when I was a kid, and it was really funny, but at the same time, like, I saw a lot of my own eating tendencies in the kids who were being called fat in that movie. They were literally at fat camp, and they were also like creating little hidey holes and stowing away food like they were squirrels. And I did that kind of same thing. So that wasn't good. But then on top of that, I would get very, very hungry because I wasn't allowed to snack much between meals. And I was just hungry. So then when dinner time would come, I would serve myself food from the whatever plates we had out. We all kind of would just like communally take what we wanted onto our plate. It was all on the dinner table. And when you're a kid, you don't really know how much is enough. That whole your eyes are bigger than your stomach thing. Well, I learned that the very, very hard way. So I would often put too much food onto my plate and say that, like, I'm hungry, so I'm gonna eat it. And then, of course, most of the time I wasn't able to eat it all. And instead of that becoming just like okay, well, you know what, it's okay, but don't do that again, or this is the reason why I'm trying to tell you, like, take a little bit and you can take more later. But I also had 3 brothers, and they were like vultures with everything in the house, especially when they were going through puberty. So I felt like I needed to, like, take what was mine, or else I wasn't gonna have any at the end. So this became not just a conversation. My mom would make me sit at the dinner table with my plate of food in front of me, and she said I could not get up until it was done. So my butt was glued to that chair, and my parents would bring over my book bag, and I have to sit there and do my homework and literally not move until I finished all of my food. And sometimes this led to me throwing up. Sometimes it led to me just feeling really, really sick. A lot of times it made me cry, obviously, because I was full, I was stuffed, and I did not want any more food. But that was like my punishment for not listening, I guess. And so that developed a whole nother bad habit where I feel like I'm making a mistake if I don't eat everything on my plate. I feel like I have to clear my plate. And my current partner can tell you, and he makes fun of me about it, but he doesn't know this, that I eat literally like every last grain of rice that's on my plate is all gone. That's not just because I'm hungry. It's like become a built-in habit. So there are a number of things that started in my childhood that made me have a bad relationship with food early on. Then this transitioned into having a bad body image because my mom the girls at school also said things. But the reason why I'm focusing on my mom in this case is not to like out her or make her look bad, but because she was my mom and it had the biggest impact on me. She was very gatekeeping about what I could and couldn't wear from a very young age, and would very, I guess, unabashedly tell me that I wouldn't look good in that, or I was too big for that, whatever. I distinctly remember to this day when I was outside, I was on the deck. I can't remember if I was in a new outfit or a bathing suit or what, but she said something to me about my stomach looking like an inner tube. Okay, like you would float in the pool, you know, those donuts. And that stuck with me, obviously, to this day. It's probably been over 20 years since she said that, and I never forgot it. I mean, it killed me. It made me feel so incredibly bad about my body. And if you want to guess, the number one thing that I hate about myself now is my stomach. To this day, it drives me crazy. No matter how much weight I lose, no matter how many sit-ups I do or what I look like, I constantly, perpetually feel like my stomach is too fat. Like it needs to be bored flat or have defined abs in order for me to be attractive or have a good body, have a body that people aren't going to make fun of. So despite the fact that I'm as thin as I've ever been now, the fact that I don't have a completely flat stomach still drives me crazy, and still is the motion behind a lot of my poor eating habits and my exercising as a way to kind of compensate when I don't eat well. And yeah, that's a really good point. And I don't know. I don't think my parents thought I was going to starve if I didn't eat the food. They were trying to teach me a lesson, I think. And thanks, Agent Pringle, for commenting on what the mail situation was like for you. Yeah, I think the girls probably, that was my thought, but I didn't know for sure. The girls, it seemed like, were much more direct about saying things like you're fat or whatever. I'm sure guys kind of like rib each other more, I feel like. But that was just a hunch. But I'm glad that you noted that you come from a Mexican family, because that's actually what some of the interesting article information that I found was about. This first one is called The Association Between Maternal Criticism and Body Dissatisfaction on Disordered Eating Pathology Across Racial and Ethnic Groups. So there's an Asian woman and a Mexican woman who created this study and did this test that they made up to try and start figuring out how these things differ across races. So like I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of people think that this is just a white woman's problem, and that's 100% not true. There are cultural differences and familial differences, value differences across different races, cultures, ethnicities that impact children everywhere. So they say in their paper that eating disorders are, they have a wide variety of medical complications, psychosocial impairment, and comorbid pathology. They can be conceptualized along a continuum. So that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier about how it's not just anorexia and bulimia. There are a host of different ways that you can have disordered eating. And these are associated with significant distress, dysfunction, and the development of, it could lead to the development of clinically significant eating disorders, which would be bulimia and anorexia. A lot of people thought that this was also only a Western thing, that this was an American type thing, Canadian, whatever type thing, and that's also not true. This happens across all races and all cultures, but it is a little bit different. So in Latina and Latino populations and Black populations, bulimia is actually more prevalent than in white populations. And then Asian Americans are more likely than white populations to have binge eating disorders. So it's not just not a white girl problem, it's actually worse in some of the minority groups out there. There's also the males versus the females, since these things affect us differently. And it seems that males are more likely to develop disordered eating patterns because of a communal setting than if just like their mom says something to them negative. They're more likely to be influenced if they are, maybe around a group of kids who are all striving for a certain body ideal, or like Agent Pringle was saying, just like kind of teasing. That is going to be more of a motivator. And if we think back on everything that we've talked about concerning the biology of the male versus the female brain, that kind of makes sense, right? Because the males tend to be more competitive. They're, like the pack leaders, and they have all of that testosterone and drive to just be better and compete and all that. So it makes sense that when they're in a communal situation, that can be a big motivator. And yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing that up too. And no, I do not know the work of Byron Katie. Yeah, obesity is another thing that runs pretty deep in a lot of Mexican culture. And another thing that happens in Latin communities in general is that they're more open about talking about their bodies too. Like, they will comment. Extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents will comment on their grandchildren's niece, nephews, whatever body. And I was reading an article about this woman who was called gorda her whole life, fat, essentially, the feminine version of fat. And she ended up losing a lot of weight when she went away to college, and then when she came back, they were calling her skinny. And both of those felt really bad to her. She didn't like the fact that her family was commenting at all on her body. But that's very common in Latin cultures for them to be very blunt and straightforward, like, you're fat. They'll say that, and it's very different than in white cultures, at least that's all I can really speak for, where people are sometimes a bit more subtle. For example, my grandmother one time was showing us this old wedding dress. When I say us, I mean me and my cousin, who's also a female. And at the time, my female cousin was really, really skinny. And my grandmother very pointedly, my cousin was like, oh, I want to try it on. And I said, me too. And my grandma kind of turned to me and was like, it's not going to fit you. So that's her way of saying you're fat. But in other cultures, they'll just straight up be like, bitch, you fat. It's a very different thing. Exactly, Sarah. That's kind of like what I've read, is that it's essentially it's supposed to be seen as love. It's not supposed to be seen the way that a lot of white cultures would see it, saying like, you're being mean. It's like, I love you and I care about you, so I'm gonna just let you know that you're fat or you're too skinny or whatever. And sometimes I've even seen in the only white culture, I guess, can you say that I've seen this in is like Italian people who will be like, you need to put on some weight, you're too skinny. But I really don't see that at all, mainly with white people. Aside from that, a lot of the times it will just be like a mom encouraging, influencing, telling their daughter specifically about things to deal with food and body image. And yeah, I don't know if this is exactly what you mean, fake Chris Pratt, but earlier on in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, everything was supposed to be about being very, very thin. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. Women were meant to be like pencils. You weren't supposed to have hips. And you can think back to like the popular TV show Friends. If you look at the main women on that show, Courtney Cox, Jennifer Aniston, a little bit Lisa Kudrow, but mainly those two were very, very, very thin. They were just straight up and down, and that was like the thing to be. If you had hips, curves, boobs, but you were deemed fat, unattractive, out of shape even. And yeah, that's another good point, Sarah, is that a lot of the times when people start commenting on your weight or your eating habits, it's not something that you don't already know, especially if you are older and established and once you're out of middle school, you're aware of these things. It's not hidden knowledge. So it's really unnecessary after that point for anyone to be saying anything about anyone's body, unless it's in a helpful and constructive way. If someone comes up to you and says, hey, do you mind helping me be accountable? I'm trying to change my eating habits or whatever, then okay, of course. Or if you have, a 600-pound life person in your family who is killing themselves by eating, you want to stop enabling them. You want to do what you can to help them live. That is when it's in their best interest. If someone's literally dying, killing themselves over eating or not eating, I feel like those are times when it's appropriate to chime in. It's almost like your responsibility at that point, I would say. But outside of that, I just don't know that it's something that really needs to be said. Now, on the other hand of that same coin, I guess I should say that I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the body positive movement as it stands right now. I don't think that people's value comes from their size. And that's something that has been a part of me forever. That's not new to me just because people are starting to stand up for it. The very first person who I ever had like a real relationship with, he was very big. We were only like 13, 14. We dated till we were like 16. So like 3 years, but we were young. But it was at that crucial time where how you look really, really matters. And he was a really big guy, and I didn't care. That wasn't anything that mattered to me. So I have a long history of being very accepting and inclusive, and I really don't even think of it as inclusivity because I'm not trying to make anyone fit in. It's just if I like that person's personality and the way that they carry themselves, and if they make me laugh and that kind of thing, that is where my attraction to another person comes into play. So I've dated people who are very big. The biggest person who I did date was a pro Halo gamer, and he was probably around 400 pounds, and that didn't make a difference to me. It wasn't about that. However, rounding back to my point about body positivity, I do think that you can't deny the science behind the fact that eventually you are hurting your body. You are setting yourself up for a heart attack or diabetes or some other incurable problem. Sometimes they're curable through losing weight. Some of them are not. I don't think that we should be encouraging people to try and stay overweight, because there's plenty of medical evidence to show that that is unhealthy for your body. And I don't know about you, but I want the people who I love to live a really long time. I don't want something bad to happen to them. And that's where I kind of draw the line and say, like, people can do whatever they want, and I'm never going to judge them for that. It's not going to change how I treat them or look at them or feel about them. What is going to change that is if they're killing themselves, essentially, by their relationship with food. That is a problem to me. And hi, Dead Chicken Leg. Welcome. And that's good, yeah. So, like, friends can be a great way to help yourself move into a better space when it comes to your emotions, your eating, and your body image. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that it should be kind of well done, I guess. I think there's a tactful way to go about that kind of stuff. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I was physically attracted to those people. Their size wasn't an issue for me. That didn't change how I felt about them in that way, if that makes sense. And I do agree with you that you do need to be physically attracted to your partner, or else your relationship is not going to work out. That's also proven through science. But yeah, I do think, though, if you just judge a book by its cover and immediately say, all people who weigh X amount I'm not into, well, you haven't met all people who weigh X amount, so how do you even know that? I don't know. Anyway, so body dissatisfaction is something that increases our poor relationships with food. And I'm going to just jump from this one. These things are kind of interwoven. So what I'm about to say is from the National Eating Disorders.org, which is abbreviated NEDA, N-E-D-A. So they say that your body image, they define it as how you see yourself when you look in the mirror, or how you picture yourself in your own mind. So that's really important. Body image is not just, it's not factual necessarily. You can look at yourself in the mirror and think that you look a certain way, or you can call yourself to mind and think that you look a certain way, and that can completely not be true. I remember there was a show on MTV a long time ago that was the first thing that ever introduced me to the concept of body dysmorphia. And I thought this girl on there, I still remember what she looked like. I thought she was insane because she looked good. She looked so good. There was nothing wrong with how she looked, but she just kept thinking that she was fat. And I was like, girl, I would kill to have your body. Like, she looked so good. And I kind of realized that, like, I do that same thing to myself now. I absolutely hate my body at all times. I never feel confident or comfortable with how I look. When I envision myself, I always envision myself at my heaviest, never at what I actually look like now. And still, when I see myself in the mirror, I just think back to, like, your stomach is too fat, and that leads to your arms are too fat, your boobs are no good, your chin is too fat, you're, just dumb. It just cycles one thing into the next thing. It's really easy to have a bad body image. And when you conjure your body image, this can include memories that you have, assumptions that you make, generalizations that you make. Your emotions can play a part in your body image. Your height, shape, and weight can all become under scrutiny. So if you're obsessed with the fact that you wish you were taller or shorter or whatever. And then also your sensations of movement and how you feel like you can control your body. So I've always kind of thought of myself as an overweight, klutzy type person. I used to always wish that I was a little bit taller. And then, I found out that, people are into, girls who are short. Girls are supposed to be small and dainty. So then I was like, I'm too tall. I need to be shorter. Everything that I thought about myself was 100% based on what other people said and felt. Even if it wasn't to me, I just heard. It's like that whole like stupid thing in middle school. Oh, if you have the side of your ear pierced, you're gay. And like obviously I didn't care, but that was just like, it's kind of that same thing. It's like, oh, I don't want to be that person. That one doesn't apply to me, obviously, because I knew I was gay already by that point. But, you know, the concept of just like, I don't want to be the odd man out. You know, I don't want someone to look at me and say like, ha ha, you have this thing that no one wants. So a lot of the times I would change what I wanted about myself based on what was in or what was out. Luckily for me now, having a bigger lower section is in. So that's one thing that I feel really good and confident about in myself now, is from the waist down, I'm like, hey, I'm really happy with that part of my body, that half of my body. But from the waist up, I hate myself every day. So that's body image, what we just discussed. Positive body image means that you have a true perception of yourself. So you see your body as it actually is. So you'd think that it wouldn't take a lot to have a positive body image, but I've been hard pressed to find a single person in my life who does. I don't know anyone who doesn't self-deprecate, who doesn't think that something's wrong with them in one way or another. You know, I've met like hundreds of people in my life who I consider to be totally beautiful, like men and women, that I'm just like, you're perfect the way that you are. You're a great package, you know? Like, I wouldn't change anything about you. I think it would be weird if you looked any different than you look. But all of them have had something that they don't like about themselves. So if you do have a positive body image, that's awesome. But all that means is that you actually see yourself the way that you are. You're not distorting it in any way. That's positive body image. Okay, now body positivity, these are all so close that it's really irritating, but body positivity is body satisfaction. Okay, does that make sense? So positive body image, you just see yourself as you are. Body positivity, you like what you see. You like. I guess it's possible then to have body positivity without having a positive body image. You can like think that you look amazing, or think that you are such and such small, or your boobs are such and such big, or you have, you know, your biceps are a certain width around or whatever, and that could completely not be true, but you could feel that way and love yourself for it. I assume that's possible. So the body positivity is feeling comfortable and confident in your body just as it is. And you accept your body, and you acknowledge that your value as a human being isn't tied to your physical form. I have really good body positivity for other people. I look at other people and I feel great about them. And I'm like, go you, you know, you're a great looking human being. You did well. But I've never in my life had that towards myself, where I look at myself and I'm like, okay, you know, you look good. Your value is not tied to how you look. I've never thought that. Whew. I have more of the negative body image. Sorry, I'm changing my sleep schedule, so I really apologize for yawning. I know that's really inappropriate, but it's just happening. Negative body image is probably what I relate with more. And this is feeling shame, anxiety, self-consciousness about your body in general. You feel flawed in comparison to other people. So you're comparing yourself to other people. And it can cause depression. It can cause you to isolate yourself. It can cause low self-esteem. And of course, eating disorders. Negative body image is one of the most prominent contributors to both bulimia and anorexia. So those aren't things that just start because like, oh, I don't like food, or I don't like how digestion feels. It's often because people are very depressed and upset about how they think their body looks, especially in comparison to other people. Hey, Sawyer. That's interesting, fake Chris Pratt. I think that that's happening a lot too now, with sexuality and with gender. A lot. Sorry, I'm just catching up on chat. And yeah, famous people do make us feel really bad about our bodies. I 100% agree. Social media, of course. I hate saying social media because I feel like I'm like 60 when I say that. It just sounds like social media. I don't know what to call it though, aside from that. But I guess I've just heard too many like news anchors and like parents say it, so it just bothers me. But social media definitely influences how we feel, and like obviously, and yes, men can absolutely have a negative body image. And the other article that I have here is about that. We'll jump to that real quick. Triggered. Okay, so this one is called Getting Shredded: Development and Validation of a Measure of Muscularity-Oriented Disordered Eating. Essentially, the things that I thought were interesting from this article. Number one, investing in becoming muscular has been seen in boys as young as 8 years old. 8 years old, and these boys are already thinking, I need to be more muscular. This isn't the only way, by the way, that men can have a negative body image. This is just one way that's very prevalent and under talked about. So far, I've mainly been talking about like eating too much or having issues with that. But this is another type of disordered eating, which is focused on becoming shredded, bruh. That's good, I guess. It's good to be hungry. So this is something that's been found in white culture, Asian, Black, and Hispanic populations as well. Some of the behaviors that come along with this are compulsive exercise, use of appearance and performance-enhancing substances, and muscularity-oriented disordered eating, which is different than regular disordered eating because they'll do things like focus on eating way too much protein, cutting out carbs and fats. They have a lot of diets actually that can be very, very harmful to your brain and body in an effort to get lean and build muscle. So this is called muscularity disordered eating, or MDE for short. And I think there was one other thing I wanted to say from this article was that actually, I think I kind of just said it. It can also include working out and having gym routines that interfere with like your regular life. It can interfere with your academics, your social life, your ability to work, that kind of thing. And these risks include I don't know if I'm saying this right, bradycardia, which is essentially like your heart works slower than it should, renal failure, orthostatic heart rate, and amenorrhea, which I thought amenorrhea was the loss of your period, so I don't know why they're including that, but maybe they're just also including that women can also participate in this, which is true. There was actually this girl who I saw, another random girl who I found on YouTube. Her name's Stephanie Buttermore. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of her. She was incredibly ripped, I think she competed maybe for bodybuilding or something like that. And I saw her video about going all in, essentially changing her diet and starting to eat like a normal human being instead of eating like a bodybuilder. And I talked to my partner about that, and he was like, he recognized her, And he said, you know, I watch a guy on YouTube and she's been in his videos. And I was like, oh, you know, who? And he showed me, and I was like, I know him. Like, that's her boyfriend. So this couple, they date. Stephanie and I don't remember what his name is. He's a bodybuilder as well. So they're both in the fitness arena. And it was really interesting for me to talk with my partner about the similarities and differences and opinions on these things as well. Men are not left out of this, which is unfortunate, I guess, because, you know, I'd rather it be only part of the population, but it's the whole population. There's a lot of videos on YouTube, and also there are accounts on Instagram, such as and on Reddit, Instagram versus reality, Beauty False. There are a lot of places out there who are trying to show the way that people are modifying their pictures in order to fit a certain ideal. Obviously, some people go all the way and get plastic surgery and injections and all kinds of stuff to look like Kylie or Kim or someone famous. Going in and saying, oh, I want Angelina Jolie's lips, I want so-and-so's nose, I want, you know, whatever. And this has kind of evolved, I guess, into, I mean, you guys know the body type for women. It's bored flat stomach, noticeable chest, huge ass, and the rest of you is not allowed to have any fat anywhere, which is maybe a few people's body type in the world naturally, but for most people, like for me, if I continue to lose weight, which I hope I do because I'm trying to get more healthy, and I'm not quite where I want to be yet, I'm going to have a smaller bust than I do right now. Your butt is really the only thing that you can make bigger because it's a muscle. You can literally do deadlifts and squats and a whole bunch of other kinds of exercises to increase the 3 muscle groups in your ass, and it will get bigger. That's not, I mean, there's still a certain extent that it's going to cap out at. Genetically speaking and just physically speaking, you can't end up with a huge bubble butt. That's not normal. And if you ever see an unedited version of the pictures of girls who do have that butt and it's fake, it looks crazy. Let me put it that way. It looks really, really crazy. So we know exactly how this story goes for women, but this is also something that happens for men. There are, my partner was actually telling me about this guy who showed this intentionally on Instagram or Reddit or something like that. He took a picture or a video of himself not flexing, just standing in his bathroom. It wasn't like perfect lighting. He was just kind of like chilling, and he looked like a normal guy. He was still in shape, athletic, whatever you want to call it, but he didn't have like defined abs, and his biceps weren't like rippling, you know. It was just like a normal in shape dude. And then without cutting the camera, he goes and does like 20 push-ups or something like that, does some crunches, gets the blood flow going to his muscles, and then turns on different lighting and comes and stands in it, and he looks insanely shredded, right? So it's like he just showed very clearly how you can manipulate right before a picture. And I can't tell this, but my partner said he's really gotten good at spotting when someone has just, you know, pumped before their picture. So guys are doing this too. They're using self-tanning products, they're using workout techniques, they're using lighting, everything to make themselves look more muscular, leaner. It's not something that's just happening for women. And I've also seen on Reddit, I've seen men who are also photoshopping themselves. There was one that I saw on YouTube. There are these 2 brothers, twins. I don't know who they are, but they're very famous apparently. and only one of them has abs. So they photoshopped the one's abs onto the other one. They're like standing in the rain with these like white t-shirts on, so it's like clinging, you know how it does. And yeah, they photoshopped the abs onto one of them. I'm like, Jesus, like what is this teaching people? It's inattainable body standards is what it is. I don't know what you think I said my boyfriend said. Or are you talking to somebody else? I missed some stuff. Oh, about your feet. I don't know if you were serious about that, but probably not because you said something about wearing a bag over your head. Yeah, I've seen that too. A lot of Russian dudes. Oh God, that just makes me sick thinking about them popping. Oh, but yeah, a lot of people get these bicep implants and they look like Popeye, and it's just like really abnormal looking and scary. But the reason why these people do these things is because they have this really negative body image, and they probably have body dysmorphia. They think that they look bad, and then they think when they put these really abnormal, or they have these really abnormal surgeries that they look good then. And yeah, that's another thing as well. And I guess that does fall into body image. Is I was thinking more physical body, but this is another problem. Shaming on the basis of skin color. In a lot of Asian cultures, being as white as possible is ideal. And same in Indian cultures. If they have darker skin, they use products to lighten their skin. They don't want to be on the darker end, which is really sad and also just a shame, I guess, because I think, I don't know, some of like the most beautiful people I've seen in the world have really dark skin, and like it's just shitty that we've made anyone feel that way, or that any sort of cultural traditional thing that has been passed down makes anyone feel like there's a problem with their skin color. Especially because it's something that we can't change. You know, you're born the way that you're born, and you have to live with that your whole life. So it's really shitty to like put that on someone, and then they have to go their whole life thinking that there's something wrong with them, which is ridiculous. Good night. Thanks for chatting. So the boys by age 8, some of them are worried about being muscular. Flipping back to the Nita stuff, girls by age 6 are concerned with becoming fat. 50% of teenage girls and roughly 33% of teenage boys engage in unhealthy weight control tactics, which can include not eating, fasting, smoking cigarettes, vomiting, and taking laxatives. And of course, we've talked about kind of like the ideals that we have right now for men and women. You know, women are supposed to be slim, thick. Men are supposed to be lean and muscular. That's the quote-unquote ideal in Western cultures. It's important to note, though, that that is not the ideal for all cultures and for all ethnicities. It varies based on a lot of things. So the next website that I have information from is called the National Eating Disorders Collaboration. And they broke body image down into 4 parts. So we talked earlier about how body image is just how you see yourself, how you perceive your body to be. They broke it down into, number 1, perceptual body image, this is the basic one that we were talking about. It's how you perceive yourself, and it might not be aligned with reality. Secondly, there is affective, however you want to say it, affective with an A, body image, which is the amount of satisfaction or dissatisfaction that you get from your body. And this can be your height, your weight, your shape, or even specific body parts. So if you're particularly fixated on your genitalia or your feet or your elbows or your knees or whatever, that would be included. The third one is cognitive body image, and this is the way that you think about your body. It can make you feel really obsessed with your shape and your weight, and it's also the basis of thinking that we will feel better about ourselves if X thing happens. So for me, I often feel like I'm going to feel better about myself if I have like minimal abs. That's like my life goal. Also, to do a pull-up is one of my life goals, but these are like body related things that to me, I feel in my head, like I've said this out loud so many times too. If I only had a flat stomach, I would be happy and I wouldn't care about the rest of my body. It wouldn't bother me if I had fat on my arms or on my legs or wherever else, because I just want a thin stomach. And unfortunately, the current trends have sort of reinforced that for me, because if you have a stomach at all, you're seen to be chunky and undesirable. And now a lot of people are surgically giving themselves a flat stomach. So that, or they're using apps, Facetune and things, to make themselves look like they have this teeny tiny stomach. I actually am lucky enough that I do have a really small actual waist. So if I was very, very thin, I would fortunately have that sort of like hourglass type shape, which feels really weird to say that, but that's how it's described. So I would have that, and I do at the size I'm at right now. It's just bigger than I want it to be, if that makes sense. But a lot of people, a lot of girls online are actually, they look like this in reality, and then they're making themselves look like this through Facetune, which is crazy to me. So the last one is behavioral body image, and these are the actual acts that you engage in based on your body image. So, for example, if I choose not to eat all day because I feel bad about my body, that would be a behavioral body image. And they can also be things that are more sustainable than just like not eating one day. It could be like, for example, there are certain whole food groups that I've cut out of my life because I believe that if I eat them, it's a dangerous thing for me. Chocolate is one of the most recent ones that I completely cut out. When I was younger, I would not eat chips. I went through a phase of just like loving, why are chips so fucking good? I went through a phase of loving chips. I ate so many chips. If you've never had Zapp's Voodoo chips, by the way, you're completely missing out. I gave them up for Lent or something like that, and I just told myself I was never allowed to eat chips again. I have since eaten chips, and they're not as much of like a problem food for me anymore, but they've just been replaced with other problem foods. So me not eating an entire food group because I believe that that is going to make me fat, that's a behavioral body image trait. And yes, that is another huge thing, is having a thigh gap. I've never been behind that trend. I don't love the look of a thigh gap. I like my fat thighs. I'm not about it. And okay, 5 plates on your deadlift. Go ahead, you do it. I believe in you. Everyone has different goals, I feel like, when it comes to their body, and different things that they want out of their body. But a lot of the times it's not related to like, I want to be able to do a pull-up. It's more like the other things that I'm talking about, of like, I need to have a flat stomach. It's about appearance rather than what your body can actually do, the physical things that you're capable of. And I think, it can really change the way that we feel about ourselves to start focusing on what we're capable of rather than focusing on how we look. big people might be big, but that also means that they carry around a lot of weight all day. And so they are very strong a lot of the times. They're capable of throwing, picking up, and otherwise moving things that are really way too heavy for a lot of other people. And if someone who's larger goes on a fitness journey and, does their exercising or whatever, most of the time they'll be able to lift things that have taken other people a long time to get to that point. So our bodies are really capable of a lot, where we have skills even if we feel like we don't. We have the ability to get around, whether we're walking or pushing a wheelchair or using a walker or crutches or whatever. Like, we're still getting around. We're mobile in some way. We are able to breathe and talk and sing and dance and do a lot of really cool things that we take for granted a lot of the time, I feel like. And that's kind of sad too, is that if we focus more on what we can do, we're likely to have a much healthier relationship with our bodies and with food, and just kind of naturally become more athletic and fit. But we make it so much about the weight and the look that it's really discouraging. God. There's the moments where I wish I drank coffee, because it would like wake me up. Okay. Just then when I was yawning, because now I don't remember. I think that just appreciating what our bodies can do in general, though, is a great way to develop a better relationship with these concepts and make ourselves healthier. And one of the things I really like for that is called calisthenics. I don't know how many of you will have heard of that, but essentially it's just body weight exercises. If you've ever seen a video of someone who's like horizontal holding onto a pole or something like that, and you're like, holy shit, that's like a calisthenic exercise. But so is a push-up, so is a plank, so is anything that you can do with just your body weight. And a lot of behavioral body image is the acts that you engage in due to your body image. So any sort of calisthenic exercise is always a great thing to do at any size. No matter how you feel about your body, if you feel like you're not athletic at all, this is something to start that is super measurable and has a really good and drastic effect on your body over time. But at first, it's just cool to see what you can do. And a lot of people are intrigued by that and enjoy that. They might not know it, but after a while it's very enjoyable to know that, like, I can hold a plank for 2 minutes. Like, that's cool, and I appreciate the fact that my body can do that. On top of that, though, I've also gained a lot of strength in my shoulders, in my forearms, in my abs. Like, all of that gets worked as you're doing calisthenics. And I don't know whether or not, I feel like even if you're thin, you can still participate in calisthenics, and it will probably have some sort of positive impact, because just because you're skinny doesn't mean that you have a lot of the muscle mass that would be necessary to do some of the things that they do. Some of it might be really easy for you, but I feel like others of it, like, I don't feel like most people, just because they're thin, can hold themselves horizontally on a pole or do a lot of these crazy different bar maneuvers that they're doing. I think those things do require muscle that most people don't just like have naturally. So we've talked about the fact that a lot of different sources can influence how we feel about our body. And another good thing to do is to change how you talk to yourself, what you say in your head. And this is something that helps also with depression, anxiety, and any other sort of, I don't know, roadblock that you have in your life. A lot of the times we have these inner monologue that's telling us you're shit and you suck and you're fat and you eat too much and you're no good. And we kind of just take it as it comes. I feel like we don't really question it. We don't really fight back against it. I never do. Whenever my brain tells me, like, you look really fat today, I'm like, yeah, I do. You know, that's something that I just kind of agree with and go along with. It's also kind of become trendy. I feel like we talked about this a little bit in one stream. How it's kind of become trendy to hate on yourself, I guess. To openly hate on yourself and say mean things about yourself. And that too just reinforces the sort of negative self-talk that you're dealing with in your mind. So even if it feels good in the moment and it feels comforting in the moment to ease the tension that you feel by making a joke at your own expense, it's really not helping your overall, if you have an overall goal of wellness, not just fitness, but wellness, which is the whole point of these streams, is wellness. If that's something that you're interested in, that you want to feel better about yourself and just live a happier life in general and not feel like such a bump on a log just floating through life and dealing with whatever happens, there's some control that you have to take there, and there's some work that you have to do, and part of that is changing your inner monologue. And it sounds really stupid. Well, I don't like cheesy stuff. I get really uncomfortable when things get cheesy. I used to really hate it when people would like say, "Oh," that bothered the hell out of me. It made me kind of like cringe a little bit. I really, really, really don't like that. But at the same time, this is the whole thing, is that you have to learn to be kind to yourself. And it really does make a difference, though, of, if I wake up every day and I look at myself and my first thought is like, I look like shit, I'm going to go through that whole day thinking I look like shit. If I have that thought, though, and tell myself, you know what? I look fine. I look good. I look just the way that I need to look today. And I did 35 push-ups yesterday, and that was really cool, and my body's really strong, and I'm very capable, and I'm healthy, and that's a great thing. That's a completely different mindset to go through your day. Today I was reading, I'm almost through with Emma Whispers Red's ASMR based book, and I'm on like the last chapter now. But I was reading, and she was talking about kind of having a ritual in your morning and talking to yourself nicely. And one of the things that she wrote on there was something like, I'm well and strong. I'm healthy and strong, I think it was, something like that. And as I was reading that, I literally sat up straighter in the chair that I was sitting in. It was like a reminder to myself, like, I'm not sick. Nothing's wrong with my body. I'm not unwell. I'm strong and I'm capable and I'm confident. So even just reading it on a piece of paper, having that thought kind of put into your mind by someone else can have a very serious positive influence on your outlook, your mannerisms, the way that you carry yourself, and what you think about yourself. So it's very important to start becoming cognizant of the bad thoughts that you have about yourself, whatever they are. Maybe you don't like your nose, maybe you don't like your teeth, maybe you don't like your armpits, maybe you're ashamed of your knees, I don't know, like whatever thing it is for you, or things. Maybe you just generally think that you're an unattractive person. First of all, that's not true. Second of all, telling yourself that over and over again is only going to make you feel worse. It's very important that we recognize those thoughts and start treating them like bullies and fighting back. And instead saying like, no, that's not true. and focusing on something that you do believe is true. Even if you can't sit there and say, like, I'm gorgeous, you know, you can still sit there and think something good about yourself. Something. Even if it's, I have all my fingers and toes, and that's pretty fucking cool. That's enough. You know, it's still a positive thought and not a negative one. So this is something that I still struggle with all the time. I'm really good at knocking myself down, not so good at picking myself up. And that's a choice that I make every day. And it's a choice that I feel like we're all making every day. And it contributes largely to our body image and to our disordered eating. I guess another thing that you can do is like look into all of the Instagram type stuff, all of the fake pictures, and oh Christ, I will wake up. I will. Okay, hold on. They say that when you yawn, it's because you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain. Is that true? I don't know. Okay. You can look into those pictures from Instagram and all that and actually start seeing and being able to spot the reality of life versus what these things are selling. Whether it's on an advertisement on TV or a show or whatever, a lot of it is made up. Look at the people who you see when you're out and about. Don't judge them, but just look at them. Those are what real people look like. That's what the majority of the country looks like. Normal people. Another thing that I think is really dumb sounding, but true, I guess, is this like concept that we had when we were kids that like your differences are what make you special. I don't know a better way to say that doesn't sound silly in my opinion, but it is kind of true to an extent, right? Like, think about anyone who you've ever loved or anyone who you've ever been attracted to. They were their own unique individual. Even your friends or family members, whomever has mattered to you, they're a unique person, right? Unless they have an identical twin, in which case those two are unique people. But everyone's a unique person. There's nothing exactly the same about two people. And that matters, you know, like it gives someone the character that you associate with them. It gives them life in your mind. It allows you to remember them. I was telling like maybe two of you so far that who I happened to talk with that one of the women who owns the school that I'm about to start, her mouth when she talks moves exactly like my best friend Jasmine's does. That's something that I had never really thought about before, but that is a specific characteristic that Jasmine wouldn't be Jasmine without. And we all have those things. And sometimes when we see them in other people, I feel like we're much better at saying like, oh yeah, well, you know, yeah, his nose is big, but he looks so good with it. It fits him. It's how he's supposed to be. And it's interesting to me that we can make that kind of distinction about someone else. We say, oh yeah, but that looks so good on them. And then when it comes to ourselves, we don't have that same objectivity. We look at ourselves and just scrutinize and criticize and see all the things that are wrong with ourselves. So I think that that's incredibly important to keep at the forefront of your mind when you're having all that negative self-talk. Even if you can't sit there and say like, oh, I look amazing, that's fine. You can still at least appreciate the fact that you look like you. That's you. No one else gets to look like you. And that's not something that you should sit and say, well, good for them, you know, or I'm the one who's unlucky enough to look like me. It's not like that. Other people don't look at you and say, eesh, you know, it'd suck to be them. Other people look at you and say, like, okay, that's what that person looks like. To the people who love you, everything about you is you. You know, you'd be different. And I think a good example of that is, you know, recently Adele, of all people, has come under fire for getting in shape. She decided that she wanted to go on a fitness journey, and she's lost, I don't know how much weight, but you know, she looks drastically different. Her body mass is significantly smaller just on sight, and it has altered the shape of her face, you know, because when you are doughier and then you lose that weight, you start to see dimples and sort of a difference in your face that you couldn't see before. They didn't exist before. And people are upset. It's like, she's gone through all this work. She's busted her ass. She's lost weight. People before were saying she was too big, too fat. And now that she's like fit and doing her damn thing, everyone still is mad at her. They're like, oh, you're not Adele anymore because you're not on the plus side. I mean, same thing happened like with Jennifer Hudson. A lot of times that happens. It's like, if you take away a fundamental characteristic about someone, it upsets people. If you have a very characteristic nose and you get a nose job, it bothers people. They don't like that. They want you the way that they know you. So that's... Thanks. So that's one thing to keep in mind, I guess, to help boost yourself up. I don't know if that helped anyone, but... And yeah, Death Machine, I think that that's a good point to a point. Celebrities do have it easier in the sense that they have money for personal trainers, chefs a lot of the times, gyms, gym memberships, or gym at home. A lot of the luxuries that would be nice. Next stream, I'm actually going to talk about dieting and healthy eating, and I would definitely suggest, if you're working on a diet, to tune into that one. I'm not plugging myself, but just like if this topic interests you, I'll also have it up on my YouTube channel after it airs if you're ever interested. But I'm going to talk about that concept because I've often felt the same way. Like, oh, I don't have the means to achieve a certain lifestyle. And I don't believe that anymore. I feel like no matter how much money you have, it's still possible to eat better, to work on your fitness more. I think we have some resources, not all resources, but we have the ability still to succeed, I think. Yeah, so I'm definitely going to talk a lot more about that next stream. The last online resource that I had was from the Cleveland Clinic, and this was talking more about the disordered eating, which I was happy to read about a little bit more. It was, again, just talking about the fact that you don't have to be diagnosed with a full-blown eating disorder, which, again, there are only two, bulimia and anorexia. I think binge eating is also a recognized disorder in the DSM, but even if we include that one, that still does not account for a lot of people's interactions, poor health interactions with food. In the world of rehabilitation from eating disorders and disordered eating, there's not a lot of support for men, especially because, like I said, this is seen as a women's problem or a white women's problem. Men are kind of left out of the recovery process as well, and a lot of the times when they're trying to get better, they are put into programs that are centered around females, which is really disappointing and crappy. Disordered eating is, again, not reserved just for people who are underweight. That's not... Thanks, Agent Pringle. That's not the meaning of disordered eating. It doesn't just mean that you're super skinny. You can run into anyone on the street and not know that they're dealing with disordered eating, and yet it can be the only thing that they think about. A lot of people, when they see me now, probably think that I'm relatively healthy and I keep myself, decently well. And meanwhile, like today, I had a bit of a breakdown over eating way too much for breakfast and feeling like shit all day. And then I constantly have this battle in my head about like eating, not eating. Should I eat something? Am I really hungry? Well, it sounds really good, but I shouldn't. But I want to, but I shouldn't. And then I do, and I'm like, fuck, like, I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. I should not have done that. And it's an endless cycle. It's not easy for a lot of people to even be at the weight that they're at, whether they're overweight, underweight, or in the middle. A lot of people are suffering on the inside with these kinds of things, and it's horrible. It really does impact your day every day. When I wake up in the morning, I weigh myself every single day. I usually do it after I exercise to try to make it a little bit better. But I do every single day, and it is a compulsion that I don't feel like I can stop. It would bother me if I didn't know exactly how much I weighed that day. I kind of use it as a way to gauge how I should treat myself that day. Should I be lenient? Am I doing well? Should I do a really insanely hard workout because I am a little bit like I'm a half pound heavier than I was yesterday? In reality, your body can fluctuate a number of pounds each day based on things like water weight. If you ate a lot of salt the day before, you might be carrying more water the next day. You might have to use the bathroom. You might have, I don't know, just your weight changes. It fluctuates from day to day, and that's why it's typically best to weigh yourself weekly rather than daily or every couple of weeks if you're looking at progress. But I just can't not weigh myself every day. It bothers me. It's a major problem that I have, and I don't talk to people about it. It's not like I'm like, hey, my name's Violet and I have huge troubles with eating. I talk about food pretty openly because I really do love it, but on the inside, it's a constant fight that's been going on for me my entire life. And I know in some of my ASMR videos I've talked about being bigger, and I've shown some pictures, but not any picture that would really show how big I got. I don't know that I am ever going to feel comfortable sharing that kind of stuff. I know that some people do it and they're just like, oh, look at me, I've done so well, I've come so far. But when I see those photos of myself, I think, you are so ugly. Like, no one would ever want to see that. I don't even want to see that. So it's bothersome to think about showing that to other people. I thought about doing that tonight to kind of like, drive my point home, because I feel like a lot of people, when they see me, don't think anything. They don't think that I have any, they would never guess, I should say, that I have such an obsessive, problematic history with eating and daily struggles with my weight and body image. I don't think. Most people, I don't think, would ever think that. But it's 1000% true. It's probably the most obnoxious thing that I deal with on a daily basis of all the obnoxious things I deal with. There are so many weird symptoms, strange habits, and unique behaviors that I have from being on the autism spectrum, and I would live those 80 times more if it meant that I didn't have to think about my body and my weight and eating so much. Another, I guess, huge part of this for me has been when I was, when I was 13, my family moved from the north Connecticut to the south to Georgia. And that like really, really changed my life. And I think I've mentioned before that I put on like 30 pounds in like 2 months, maybe. I gained a lot of weight really, really fast. I was eating fast food all the time. I wasn't happy. I was depressed. My new schoolmates were really making fun of me and not letting me fit in at all. They kept telling me I should go back where I came from, calling me a dirty Yankee and all this stuff. That now is a little funny, but it really, really wasn't at the time. It really sucked to be the one odd person out because I was at a small private school. It was very, very isolating, and it made me eat even more. Um, by the time I was like in the middle of my high school years, I was probably 5'2" and 180 pounds, which is big for someone that height. And I felt terrible all the time, and that's when I really fell into playing World of Warcraft a lot. That was pretty much all I did, was play WoW and stay home and eat. Eat a lot because it made me feel better, I guess. And it was rewarding. It sends these signals in your brain that say like, ooh, you're happy, this is good. Food has lots of addictive chemicals in it. It's like a drug. A lot of it is now. So after gaining all that weight and feeling really terrible about myself, when I was on a bunch of different diets. My mom put me on diets from the time that I was in like 7th grade or something. The first one that I ever went on was called the Atkins or South Beach diet, which I think is kind of similar to keto now. It has been shown to be really bad for your health, but essentially what that was about was during the day, all you could eat was like chicken and nuts and peanut butter, things that didn't have like carbs in them, essentially. And then for 1 hour at night, you could eat whatever you wanted. And that was terrible. I ate horrible stuff for an hour, and it was really, really bad, and I was always getting sick. But then by the end of high school, my mom and I went to this bariatric weight specialist who gave us, I think I've mentioned this, so I'm going to give you the abridged version for just anyone who doesn't know. She gave us these pills that were essentially like legal cocaine, and they made us have no appetite. And then we would go get shots of vitamin B12 every week because they knew we'd be malnourished, I guess. And during that point in time, I became thin for the first time. Not drastically thin, but thinner than I had ever been as an adult. And I was eating every day a Whopper Jr. with cheese, a Diet Coke, and a small fry. And that was the only thing I would eat every day. Every night. That was it. Everyone thought that I was really healthy at the time. So I got a lot of compliments from people. People that I worked with were like, you look so good, what did you do? And I just told them, I quit smoking pot, which was true at the time as well, but it wasn't the whole story of what was going on. I was hopped up on these drugs and had no appetite. I was just running on adrenaline, I guess, or whatever those pills were doing to my body. And I think, again, like, this is just a really messed up thing that parents will put their children through these things, subject them to these things. My mom kind of had me do this with her, like a buddy-buddy kind of system, and I think that that's not cool to do to your growing, already disordered kid. But I felt good because it was the first time that I was getting appreciation towards my body for it being average sized, I guess. I felt really good about myself. That kind of transitioned into later on, I put on some weight again. I got really depressed, and then I started exercising like crazy. And that's another thing that can be not a good thing. Everyone thinks exercise, oh yeah, it's a great thing to exercise, but when you're doing it compulsively, or you're doing it too much, or you're doing it to punish yourself for something that you ate, it's not a good thing. It's very difficult to grow a healthy relationship with food and exercise, which is why I kind of wanted to talk about this, I guess. And yeah, ADD medicine, whether it's Vyvanse or Adderall or whatever, that is another form of like essentially legal cocaine. It can suppress your appetite in a major way, which some people like that side effect, but it can also be bad for your nutrition. So, I don't know how you feel about that emotionally, but it's definitely something to keep track of, I guess. I think my mom has her own body. Well, I know my mom has her own body problems, and I think that she thought she was helping me. I don't think that she did it maliciously. I think she just was nervous for what she was doing to herself and wanted a friend. And at the time, I was her friend. So I think she just thought that it would be good for the both of us. And then part of her was also like, I don't want to do this alone. That's my thought. I don't know. I haven't talked to my family in a number of years, so I couldn't ask, but I imagine that's kind of what was going through her head. She also did know that I was struggling with my weight a lot, though. So, I don't know. It's very interesting, though, to see, like, how many people's mom... All of this research had nothing really to do with the dads. It was always the moms that would have some sort of influence in the child's belief of themselves or whatever. The one article that was about Asian and Latin communities specifically said that there's a study that shows that 58% of adolescent females report experience of weight-related teasing by family members. 45% reported that their mothers encouraged them to diet. Parental figures can model body dissatisfaction, over-evaluation, and disordered eating behaviors for their offspring. My mom and I did a lot of eating together, and when your family is commenting, as we talked about, on your weight and stuff, that is a huge pressure to change, to be different, to do something the way they want you to, whatever. And these studies also show that being actively criticized by your family members is more impactful than watching their habits, mimicking their habits. So even if your parent has really bad eating habits, you're less likely to pick up on those if you're not criticized. So just watching them isn't always enough. And in this, by the end of this, I should say, research thing as well, they found that among white communities and Latin communities, body dissatisfaction is more associated with disordered eating pathology than maternal criticism. So feeling bad about your body is more likely to change how you associate with food and your body than if your mother or family criticizes you. However, in Asian communities, maternal criticism is more of an influencer than how these people feel about themselves, whether it's males or females. And of course, this again falls down to like cultural differences. There's a lot of sense of loyalty, responsibility, respect, and obligation in Asian cultures, even in Latin and Black cultures as well, more so than white, I feel like. But especially in Asian cultures, it would be more of a problem if your parent was criticizing you than it would be in other cultures. Most of the time. Now, obviously, none of this is 100%. These are just studies that are done. And hey, Kespi, glad to have you. And I mean, definitely, I'm sure that ADD and ADHD medicines affect everyone differently. I just know that they are likely to suppress appetite because of the type of chemicals that are in there. Just from what I've read and experienced through people. Oh, for some reason, a lot of people I've dated have had ADD. So I've had to kind of become used to that, I guess. Ugh, yeah, that's terrible. It's so sad. I mean, for those of you who aren't here right now, Sarah's just saying that she had a Korean housemate who put on weight when they were in a training program, and she was freaking out and became essentially anorexic for a while to lose the weight before she went home because she didn't want to see her mom's reaction to her weight gain. Yeah, I mean, it's a very strong hold that these kind of ties can have in different ways. For me, I think it was more of like an emotional blow to have my mom ridiculing me. It wasn't that I wanted to please her. It wasn't that I felt like I should have a better body in order to keep her from being disappointed in me. It was more that I felt ashamed that she was making fun of me. But then in an Asian culture, it might be completely different, that you're literally worried about what they're going to think of you as like a human being. And I'm sure that that does have something, or at least has had something to do with it. The idea that you need to find a mate plays into how some parents want their children to look. I don't know why this is coming to my mind right now, but my youngest brother is a redhead. He has very, very bright, I don't know if I should call it bright, but he has essentially like auburn colored hair. It's really pretty. But he dated this girl in high school, and even though they were just like dating and they were 16 at the time, the father told his daughter that he didn't want her dating my brother because he didn't want to have redheaded grandbabies. Bruh, I was like, are you... First of all, I got so mad. I was like, first of all, my brother is handsome as fuck. His hair is amazing. Second of all, how dare you? Like, they're babies still themselves. They're kids. They weren't even having sex. They were 16, and I know that some people do that, but they weren't. You know, I knew when my brothers did. That was just the foulest thing I had ever heard a parent say. It was. I don't know what word I want to use here. I can't think of like the word. It's not, I don't know. Whatever the mentality is that like Nazis have, essentially, that they are like superior and that some other people have inferior genes, or like the way that they look is a problem. That's what I felt like of this guy. I was like, how could you say that? I mean, it's a recessive gene anyway, so there's no guarantee that their babies would have red hair, but just how cruel is that? I don't know. That really bothered me and still bothers me to this day. But parents have certain expectations for their kids sometimes that they just can't help but blurt out, and it can really change how you feel about yourself. And yeah, I've heard a little bit about that, and as I was mentioning to someone a few minutes ago, my next stream next Thursday, a week from today, is going to be focused on healthy eating and dieting. Um, and I don't mean dieting in the sense that people take it as, so I'll talk about that more. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna get into that sort of topic more in the next stream, for sure, because it is very important. And a lot of people, I think, do have misconceptions about what is healthy eating, what is a healthy relationship with food, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, maybe it is a superiority complex, I don't know. It just seemed like this guy wanted to get rid of all redheads. It was really weird. Okay, so some common physical signs of people who are struggling with disordered eating include significant fluctuations in weight, stomach pain and complaints, changes in bowel habits, dizziness, weakness, tiredness, fainting even, changes to the hair and skin, which are commonly more seen in people who are anorexic. They're not getting the nutrients that they need, so it can make their hair brittle, it can make their skin look very dull, make them have bad color. And then, of course, tooth decay is something that can happen a lot for people who are bulimic because the stomach acid coming up that often. Okay, so fun fact, whenever you're about to vomit of a natural cause, like you're sick, you have food poisoning, your body is getting something out that's bad for you, your mouth will fill up with saliva and right before you vomit. And the reason why that happens is to protect your teeth. Your body is like, oh no, this isn't good for me, so I'm gonna send all this saliva to help so that the stomach acid doesn't do a lot of damage to your teeth at the time, which is super cool. I mean, that's an amazing thing that our bodies can do. But when you're inducing vomiting often, your body is not going to have that same natural reaction, and therefore your teeth become very susceptible to the acid from your stomach, causing dental damage. Some of the eugenics, thank you, God, that was gonna bother me for so long. I read like a huge paper on that too. It's really sad, some of the things that they used to do, especially with people who they considered to be like mentally retarded or mentally challenged, which I guess I would have fallen into that category at the time, but they like sterilized people. It was really messed up. God, I am so sorry that I'm yawning so much. I'm really embarrassed, but I just can't help it. Common emotional signs of these disorders or disordered eating include preoccupation with weight, food, dieting, calories, carbs, body image, body size, body shape, weight, specific body parts maybe, limiting food by restricting whole food categories, food rituals, and not eating socially. Sometimes when I was at my heaviest, I would not want to eat in front of other people because I would just think about what they were thinking of me while I was eating. And that was like really devastating. Sometimes it would make me really, really hungry. And then when I would be alone, finally, I would eat a lot, like have a massive binge eating moment because I felt like I had been deprived, or like I was so hungry or whatever, that I wanted to eat and make up for it in a way. And also, since I was emotional and sad about not eating in front of people, I had that comfort element as well that would cause me to eat even more. If you do have any of these problems, of course, I encourage you to get help. If you don't feel like you have the type of problem that you need to go see the doctor about, at least start reading about it and trying to help yourself. Enlist someone who you can trust to help you as well, to give you good feedback, healthy feedback on eating and exercise. If you have a therapist, that's a great person to talk to. But of course, even just friends, who have a more healthy relationship with food, or maybe they don't. And maybe you guys talk about your, sort of problems together and you learn from one another. That's fine too. But do something about it. It is really detrimental to your health in the long run to be dealing with this over and over. I always wonder if I'm ever gonna recover from this. I cannot imagine living a life where I don't think about food and my weight all day, every day. It's constantly on my mind. It's always there, no matter what I'm doing, who I'm talking to, what I'm wearing, who I'm with. I constantly think about how I look and how I feel, and the fact that I just want to fucking eat something, dude. I could eat a honey bun or a box of donuts at any time. Cookies too. Any kind of cookie. It doesn't matter. I'm not picky. Any time. Like literally, you could give me those things at any time and I'll eat all of them if you ask me to. Or if I'm feeling bad. It's not difficult for me. And some people just have that. Other people have the opposite problem. I feel like I talked way too much about overeating and not about undereating. But other people have the opposite problem as well. They might have trouble gaining weight. They might have trouble eating in general. I know we're like pretty much at time, but just before we go to, like, my partner is the pretty much exact opposite of me in this regard. He is incredibly in shape. Is ridiculous. He's got muscles on his muscles, and he has a major body dysmorphia as well. Like, we talk about this together, but a lot of the times he doesn't think he looks good, and it just blows my mind because he has like no body fat and visible muscles on every surface of his body. So I just don't understand how he could think that, and it helps me see how crazy people can get about their image. So I try to help him, and he gets very obsessive about how much protein he's eating and stuff because he feels like it's important to his muscle gain, and when he wants to change oh, this could be better, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, you don't need to keep doing this. Like, you look great. Why are you worried about this? Are you like, I don't get it. And he kind of does the same thing back to me. Like, I'll be like crying, saying, I'm so fat, and he's like, why do you think you're fat? Like, you're not fat. So we kind of have the luxury or the help, I guess, in one another because we feel so drastically different about each other than we feel about ourselves. But it's very, very interesting and weird to see someone who has like what most guys would consider an ideal body type be that dissatisfied with how he looks and what he eats. And he also grew up in an incredibly healthy household. His mom was very careful to only feed him things that were good for him. They didn't have a whole lot of sweets and stuff like that in the house, and he doesn't have, well, he does kind of have a big sweet tooth now, but not so much for a lot of stuff. And he's really good at stopping himself from eating, whereas I don't have that quality whatsoever. But we still both have an obsession with how much we're eating and what it's doing to our bodies. So that just goes to show, whether you're a little bit fluffy, pudgy, have some chub on you like me, or if you're absolutely built like he is, you can still have disordered eating. There's no one size fits all for this problem. The last thing is that the people who have all these other eating disorders, they're EDNOS, eating disorder not otherwise specified. So if you want to learn more about that kind of stuff, you can Google that term. And yeah, I think that is pretty much all of it. Thank you guys again for coming. If I missed any questions, you can definitely feel free to ask now, or if there's any kind of topic that you wanted to discuss a little bit, I'll be happy to do that at this time. And I don't know what all I've been missing in chat, if anything. But I do appreciate you guys being willing to talk with me about this and have conversation about it, because I feel like we just don't talk about it enough. And especially I feel like among the male population, I don't think y'all are probably talking about it enough at all. Oh yeah, I've heard both of those things as well, that models smoke and also eat cotton in order to feel full. Oh, thank you so much. That is extra, and I'm living for it. Thank you. I'm really happy that I got it cut. Some people were worried, but I think Joshua pulled through. And yeah, you're welcome. And I hope I didn't focus too much or too little on anything. All of these different ways that eating disorders and disordered eating can present themselves are equally important. I guess, talked mainly about what I have experience with, but yeah, it's different for everyone. So thank you guys again for coming and for talking about this. And if anyone needs to talk about it any further, feel free to message me. If you need help finding local numbers or places that you can call or contact to get help, I'm more than happy to help with that as well. So right now, thank you for the question, Agent Pringle. Right now, I'm only going to be streaming on Thursdays this month. I start school this upcoming Monday, and I think I'm going to have a lot of work to do for school, and I'm also trying to pick up a part-time job at a little Chinese food restaurant down the road. So for right now, I'm just going to do Thursdays and see how I'm handling things, and then if I can increase, I'll add another stream again to do 2 streams a week. Thanks everybody, and have a good night, and I'll see you a week from today to talk about dieting and healthy eating. And thank you. I'm trying. We'll see how it goes. Check back in a month, and we'll see if I'm inspiring then or if I'm just a mess. All right, good night, guys.